My name is Carol, I'm 62 years old, and on what should have been one of the happiest weekends of my life, my future daughter-in-law screamed at me to get out of my own son's wedding rehearsal, the one I paid $50,000 for. Before I tell you about the absolute chaos that erupted when I took back every single dime, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in this. The evening had started like a fairy tale. We were at a beautiful winery in Napa Valley, the kind you see in magazines. The sun was setting over the vineyards, casting this warm golden light over everything. There was a soft glow from the string lights overhead, the sound of clinking glasses, and the low hum of happy chatter. My heart was just full. I looked around at the 50 or so guests, all our closest family and friends, and I felt a wave of pure pride. This was all for my son Kevin, my only child, my entire world. I'd worked my whole life to give him the best, and this wedding, this perfect weekend, was supposed to be my ultimate gift to him and his fiancée Tiffany. I just handed him a check from my inheritance to cover the final vendor payments, the last piece of the $50,000 puzzle. I was just taking a sip of my Chardonnay when I saw Tiffany walking towards me. Her smile, which was usually plastered on her face, was gone. It was replaced by a tight, thin line. She wasn't walking, she was marching. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. She stopped right in front of my table. She didn't say hello. She just pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the centerpieces. "What is this?" she asked, her voice dangerously low. I was confused. "They're the flower arrangements, honey. Lilies just like you wanted." Her eyes narrowed. "I wanted calla lilies. These are stargazer lilies. You knew I was allergic. You did this on purpose, didn't you?" I was floored. Allergic? This was the first I'd heard of it. We had gone over the flower arrangements on a dozen different Pinterest boards. "Tiffany, I had no idea," I started to say. "We can call the florist. I'm sure it was just a simple mix-up." "A mix-up?" She cut me off, her voice rising now, drawing the attention of the tables nearby. "This isn't a mix-up, this is you being passive-aggressive. This is you trying to ruin my day because you can't stand to see Kevin happy with someone else." The air grew thick. The chatter died down. The music felt like it had been cut with a knife. "That's not true," I whispered, my cheeks burning with humiliation. And then she exploded. It wasn't a shout, it was a shriek. A raw, ugly sound that ripped through the perfect Napa evening. "You're not welcome here," she screamed, her face contorted. "You've done enough damage. Get out." Every head turned. 50 pairs of eyes, all fixed on me. I felt them like physical blows. I looked at my son Kevin. My boy. The man I had raised. I prayed he would step in, say something, defend me. He just stared at the polished floorboards. He studied the intricate pattern of the wood, as if it held the secrets to the universe. He didn't say a word. Didn't move a muscle. He didn't even meet my eyes. That silence was louder than her screaming. It was a confirmation. An execution. My hands started to tremble. I fumbled for my purse, the very one holding the receipts for this entire nightmare. I stood up on legs that felt like they might give out. Every step towards the exit felt like walking on broken glass. I could feel the guests pretending not to stare, their pity and morbid curiosity burning into my back. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I finally made it to my car in the darkened parking lot, and collapsed into the driver's seat. I just sat there, the sound of my own ragged breathing filling the silence. The scene replayed in my mind, her venomous words, the shocked faces of our family, the way the laughter had curdled into silence. But it wasn't Tiffany's screaming that broke me. It was my son's silence. And in that cold, dark parking lot, something inside of me didn't just break. Snapped. That single word, snapped, doesn't even begin to cover it. It was more like a lifetime of holding my breath, and finally letting it all out in one ragged, painful gasp. The engine of my sensible sedan was off, the Napa night was silent, but my mind was screaming. A flood of memories, things I had pushed down for years, came rushing back with the force of a tidal wave. I saw myself at 35, recently divorced, working a second job on weekends as a bookkeeper just so Kevin could stay in his private school. I remembered the exhaustion that settled deep in my bones, the cheap microwave dinners I ate alone while he was at sleepovers. I did it because I wanted him to have every advantage, Every opportunity my ex-husband, Mark, and I could no longer afford after the divorce. It was all for Kevin. I saw myself at 48, selling the small house I had grown up in, the one my parents left me, my only real piece of inheritance. I used the money to pay off the last of Kevin's staggering college fund loans, so he could start his career debt-free. I told myself it was just bricks and mortar, that his future was more important than my sentimentality. I moved into a smaller condo. It was all for Kevin. I saw myself just 6 months ago, sitting in a little cafe with Tiffany. She was all sunshine and smiles, gushing about her dream wedding. She'd held my hand across the table, her eyes wide and sincere. "Carol," she'd said, her voice like honey, "I know this is a lot to ask. Kevin's salary is good, but with us saving for a down payment, there's just no way we can afford the wedding we've always dreamed of. We'll pay you back, I swear. As soon as Kevin gets his promotion." Like a fool, I believed her. I looked at this beautiful young woman who was going to marry my son, and I saw the daughter I never had. I wanted to give them the world. I wanted to give them the fairy tale start I never had. So I didn't just help. I took over. I wrote the checks. I negotiated with the vendors. I poured my time, my energy, and a significant chunk of my retirement savings into building their fantasy. And my reward? To be screamed at. To be thrown out like garbage in front of everyone I knew. To be publicly shamed by the woman whose dream I was funding, while my own son, the center of my universe, stood by and let it happen. The hurt was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest. But underneath it, something else was stirring. It was a cold, hard anger I hadn't felt in decades. It was the anger of the bookkeeper eating another lonely dinner. The anger of the woman handing over the keys to her childhood home. The anger of a mother who had given everything and was being treated like nothing. They hadn't just disrespected me. They had used me. They had seen my love and my generosity not as a gift, but as a resource to be exploited. A bank account with a pulse. I looked at my reflection in the dark rearview mirror. I saw the lines of exhaustion around my eyes, the silver streaks in my hair. I saw a woman who had spent her entire life being the bigger person, swallowing her pride, keeping the peace. For what? For this? No, not anymore. The lump in my throat wasn't sadness anymore. It was resolve. My hands, which had been trembling, were suddenly steady. I picked up my smartphone, its screen glaring in the darkness. My thumb scrolled through my contacts, past friends, past family, past Kevin's name, which I couldn't even bear to look at, until I found it. Brenda Wedding Planner. My thumb hovered over the call button. For a split second, a wave of doubt washed over me. This was my son's wedding. Could I really do this? Could I really tear it all down? Then I heard Tiffany shriek in my head again. "Get out!" And I heard the deafening silence from my son that followed. My thumb came down hard on the screen. It was time for them to learn that if you throw the banker out of the party, the bank closes. The line rang once. Twice. Brenda answered on the third ring. Her voice the epitome of professional cheerfulness. "Carol. Hi. Is everything all right? I was just going over the seating chart for." "Cancel it," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. Didn't even sound like my own. There was a dead pause on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, what? Did you say cancel?" "Yes," I repeated, a strange sense of calm settling over me. "Cancel everything. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the band. I'm pulling the plug on the entire event. Effective immediately." "Carol, hold on," Brenda said, her voice laced with panic now. "The wedding is in less than 48 hours. The contracts are signed. The deposits are non-refundable. We can't just—" "Brenda," I interrupted, my voice still unnervingly calm. "Whose name is on those contracts?" Another pause. "Well, yours is," she stammered. "You're the primary client, the one who paid for." "Exactly," I said. "And whose credit card is on file for all the final payments due tomorrow morning?" Silence. "That would also be mine," I continued. "Brenda, I was just publicly humiliated and thrown out of the rehearsal dinner by the bride. My son stood by and did nothing. I was told in no uncertain terms that I am not welcome. So let me be very clear. If I am not welcome at this wedding, neither is my money." I could hear her taking a deep, shaky breath. She was a planner. She fixed problems. But this wasn't a problem she could fix. This was a demolition. Carol, are you absolutely sure? This is catastrophic. The only catastrophe, I said, a hint of ice creeping into my voice, was thinking my generosity would be met with anything other than entitlement. Cancel it all. Send me the confirmation emails. I hung up before she could argue further. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel glee. I felt a cold, clean sense of purpose. For the first time in years, I wasn't fixing someone else's problem or smoothing over someone else's bad behavior. I was protecting myself. I drove home on autopilot, my mind a blank slate. When I walked into my quiet condo, the first thing I saw was the wedding binder sitting on my kitchen table. It was a thick 3-ring monstrosity, meticulously organized with tabs. Venue, caterer, florist, photographer, band, honeymoon. I had spent countless hours creating it. I opened it and the irony was sickening. Every page, every invoice, every contract had my signature at the bottom. They had contributed nothing but a Pinterest board and an attitude of boundless expectation. My resolve hardened. The call to Brenda was just the first step. I needed to make sure they couldn't just call behind my back and smooth things over. I picked up my phone again. First, the winery in Napa. A polite but firm manager answered. "Hi, this is Carol Meyer," I said. "I'm the contract holder for the Meyer-Whitaker wedding this Saturday." "Yes, Ms. Meyer. We're all set for you. It's going to be a beautiful day. I'm canceling effective immediately." The manager sputtered. He mentioned the cancellation policy, the massive fee. "That won't be necessary," I said coolly. "Per Section 7B of the contract you and I both signed, the client can terminate within 72 hours of the event with forfeiture of the deposit only. The final payment has not been processed. I am the client and I am terminating." There was a stunned silence, then a cautious, "Understood, ma'am. We will process the termination." Click. One down. Next, the caterer. The same routine. The same shock, the same arguments about losing money. But the contract was ironclad. My signature. My money. My decision. As I hung up the phone with the caterer, feeling a little bit taller, a little bit stronger, my phone buzzed. A text message notification lit up the screen. It was from my sister-in-law, Susan. My heart sank, expecting a lecture. But it wasn't words. It was a picture. A picture that made the blood in my veins turn to ice. The picture was a screenshot from an Instagram story. One of Tiffany's bridesmaids must have posted it to her close friends list, and Susan, my sister-in-law, was on it. The photo showed Tiffany beaming, standing on a pedestal in a bridal boutique. But it wasn't the dress I had paid $8,000 for. This one was different. It was an extravagant cascade of lace and beading, the kind of dress that probably cost as much as a small car. She looked ecstatic. And underneath the photo, the bridesmaid had written a caption in a bubbly pink font. "Secret final fitting. Shua, don't tell the mother-in-law. Winky face. #upgrade, #worth every penny." I stared at my phone, my breath caught in my throat. I read the caption again. And again. "Don't tell the mother-in-law. Upgrade." It wasn't a mix-up. It wasn't an innocent browse. This was a calculated deception. While I was busy managing caterers and florists, she was behind my back, picking out an even more expensive dress, fully intending to what? Stick me with the bill after the fact? Hope I wouldn't notice the extra $10,000 or $15,000 on my credit card statement. The audacity of it was staggering. It felt like a punch to the gut, knocking all the air out of my lungs. The anger I felt before was a controlled burn. This was a forest fire. This wasn't just about disrespect anymore. This was about being played for a fool. This was a premeditated plan to squeeze every last cent out of me. The sweet, gushing girl who had promised to pay me back felt like a character from a work of fiction. The real Tiffany was right here in this picture, smiling a smug, secret smile, laughing at the gullible old woman paying for her fantasy. My mind started racing, connecting dots I hadn't seen before. The little extra charges she'd put on the card I gave her for deposits, the upgraded champagne package, the premium lighting. I had thought she was just getting carried away in the excitement. Now I saw it for what it was, a test. Pushing the boundaries, seeing how much she could get away with before I noticed. And my son, did Kevin know about this? He had to. There was no way he couldn't. Which meant that while he was letting me write check after check from my retirement savings, He knew his fiancée was plotting to deceive me even further. The betrayal was so deep, so complete, it felt like I was choking on it. The phone felt heavy and cold in my hand. I thought about the remaining vendors on my list, the photographer, the band. Before, canceling was about reclaiming my dignity. Now, it was about cutting off the supply line to a pair of con artists. I was about to dial the photographer when a loud, insistent knocking rattled my front door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a pounding. Angry. Demanding. I didn't need to look through the peephole. I knew who it was. My son had arrived to demand an explanation from the bank he thought he owned. My entire body went rigid. A part of me, the mother in me, wanted to run and hide. But the woman who had just stared at that Instagram photo, the woman whose trust had been shattered into a million pieces, that woman walked towards the door. This wasn't just a fight about a canceled wedding anymore. This was a fight for my own self-respect. I took a deep breath, turned the deadbolt, and pulled the door open. Kevin stood there, his face flushed, his eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen directed at me in his entire life. He didn't wait for an invitation. He stormed past me into my own home. "What the hell did you do?" he barked, his voice echoing in the small foyer. He was pacing back and forth on my welcome mat like a caged tiger. "Brenda just called me in tears. The venue canceled. The caterer. Are you insane? You've destroyed everything." "Lower your voice," I said. My tone was so quiet and cold it seemed to startle him into a momentary silence. "You are in my house." He stopped pacing and ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "My house? Mom, you've ruined our wedding. Tiffany is hysterical. Do you have any idea what you've done to her?" "What I've done to her?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Let's talk about what she did to me, Kevin. In front of 50 of our closest friends and family." His jaw tightened. "She was stressed. You know how weddings are. You shouldn't have gotten the wrong flowers." "The wrong flowers?" I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "That's your excuse for her screaming at me to get out? For you standing there like a statue while she did it?" I held up my phone, the Instagram photo still glowing on the screen. Or maybe she was stressed about how she was going to hide this from me. He glanced at the phone and his face went pale. He couldn't even meet my eyes. That was all the confirmation I needed. "Oh, you knew," I said softly, the realization landing like a lead weight in my stomach. "You knew she was picking out another dress behind my back." "It wasn't like that," he stammered, looking away. "She just saw it, and she fell in love with it. We were going to talk to you about it. Eventually." "Eventually." I snapped, my control finally breaking. "You mean after the wedding, when the bill just magically appeared on my credit card? Did you think I was that stupid, Kevin? Did you think your mother was just an open wallet with no feelings? It's always about you, isn't it?" He shot back, his voice turning cruel. "Your feelings, your money. You've always been like this. So controlling. You want to hold this wedding over our heads forever." The accusation stung, but what he said next shattered me. He looked at me with cold, dead eyes, the eyes of a stranger, and said, "Now I get it. This is why Dad left you." The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. It felt like he had physically slapped me across the face. For 30 years, I had never once spoken ill of his father to him. I had protected him from the ugly truth of his father's affair and abandonment. I had shouldered the blame for the divorce to spare his feelings. And this is how he repaid me. He took my deepest wound and used it as a weapon against me. As I stood there, reeling from the blow, my phone started buzzing incessantly on the entryway table. It was a string of text messages from Tiffany. I picked it up, my hands shaking. "Tiffany, 6:18 p.m. You are a bitter, jealous old woman." "Tiffany, 6:19 p.m. You've always hated me because you can't stand to see your son happy." "Tiffany, 6:20 p.m. Stay away from us. You're toxic. I hope you die alone." I read the last message out loud, my voice trembling. "I hope you die alone." I looked up at Kevin, my eyes pleading with him to see the venom, to see the monster he was about to marry. He just shrugged, a pathetic, weak gesture. "She's upset," he mumbled. "She's upset." I cried, my voice cracking. "Or is she just finally showing her true colors, and you're too much of a coward to see it?" That was it. I had nothing left to say. There was a chasm between us now, one that I knew could never be bridged. I walked to the door and opened it wide. Get out of my house. He stared at me for a long moment, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He was waiting for me to back down, to cry, to apologize, to do what I had always done. Fix it. But that woman was gone. He finally seemed to realize it. With a final disgusted look, he stormed past me, slamming the door so hard that a picture frame on the wall rattled and fell to the floor, the glass shattering into 1,000 tiny pieces. It was a photo of me and a 6-year-old Kevin at Disneyland, both of us smiling. I just stared at the wreckage. Felt fitting. I didn't even have time to sweep up the broken glass before my phone started ringing. It was a relentless assault. I knew what was happening. Kevin and Tiffany were deploying their troops. The first call was from my sister-in-law, Susan. Mark's sister. The one who sent me the photo. I thought naively that she might be calling to offer support. "Carol," she began, her voice cautious and tentative. "I just got off the phone with Kevin. He's an absolute wreck." I stayed silent. I was done making excuses for him. "Listen," she continued, her tone shifting into that gentle, chiding voice she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "I know things got heated, but you can't just cancel the whole wedding. Think about the family, the guests who have flown in. You have to fix this. Fix this." I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Susan, did he tell you what he said to me? What his fiancée texted me?" "He said everyone was upset and things were said in the heat of the moment," she said dismissively. "But Carol, this is his wedding. You don't want to be the one to ruin it. Sometimes you just have to be the bigger person." There it was. That phrase. The phrase that had been used to silence me my entire life. Be the bigger person, Carol. It was code for, let them walk all over you, Carol. Your feelings don't matter as much as keeping the peace, Carol. The bigger person is also the one with the empty bank account and a knife in her back, I said flatly. "I'm done." I hung up before she could reply. My finger had barely left the screen when it rang again. This time the caller ID made my stomach clench. Mark. My ex-husband. We hadn't spoken in over a year. "Carol," he said, foregoing any pleasantries. "What in God's name is going on? Kevin just called me beside himself. You canceled his wedding." "Hello to you too, Mark," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's been a while." "Don't play games," he snapped. "I don't know what happened at that rehearsal, but this is too much. You're humiliating the boy." "Humiliating him?" I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Mark, where were you when his fiancée screamed at me in front of 50 people? Where were you when our son stood there and let her? Where have you been for the last 20 years of his life, for that matter? This isn't about our divorce," he said sharply. "Don't dredge up old wounds. This is about Kevin and Tiffany. He loves her. Just let them have their day. For God's sake, be the bigger person." Hearing it from him, the man who had created the first great wound of my life, and then walked away without a backward glance, was the final straw. "You know, Mark," I said, my voice shaking with a fury that had been dormant for decades. "It's easy to tell someone to be the bigger person when you're not the one paying the price. You want them to have their day? Then you pay for it. You write the $50,000 check. You deal with the entitled bride and the spineless groom. But my time of being the bigger person is over. It died tonight, right alongside any respect I had left for my son. Carol, don't be so dramatic." I hung up on him mid-sentence. I sank onto my couch, the phone falling from my hand. The house was silent except for my own ragged breathing. So this was it. This was my family. An ex-husband who only called to scold me, a sister-in-law who preached peace at my expense, and a son who would use my deepest pain against me to defend his manipulative fiancée. They didn't see me as a mother, a sister, or a person. I was a function, a convenience, a wallet. The realization didn't crush me. I was past the point of being crushed. It settled into my bones, cold and heavy like granite. And I knew with absolute certainty that I had a choice. I could crumble, call everyone back, and beg for forgiveness just to keep the fragile peace. Or I could see this through to the very end. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. It was time to find someone who was actually on my side. I looked up the number for the one person I knew wouldn't tell me to be the bigger person. She would tell me to fight back. It was time to call my lawyer. The next morning, I walked into the law offices of Chun and Associates. The contrast with the chaos of the last 12 hours was jarring. Here, everything was calm, quiet, and professional. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and expensive paper. David Chun had been my lawyer for years. He'd handled my parents' estate and my will. He was sharp, discreet, and had a no-nonsense attitude that I desperately needed right now. He greeted me not with pity, but with a firm handshake and a simple, "Carol, you look exhausted. Tell me everything." And so I did. Sitting in a plush leather chair across from his mahogany desk, I laid it all out. The rehearsal dinner. Tiffany's public screaming. Kevin's gut-wrenching silence. The Instagram photo of the second dress. The cruel confrontation and the horrible things Kevin had said about my divorce. The harassing text messages. The phone calls from Susan and Mark. The binder full of contracts and receipts, which I placed on his desk with a heavy thud. He listened intently, his fingers steepled under his chin. He didn't interrupt once. His expression was unreadable, which was somehow comforting. When I finally finished, my voice hoarse, he leaned back in his chair. "Well," he said, his voice calm and measured. "First, let me be very clear on this, Carol. Legally, you have done absolutely nothing wrong. Every contract is in your name. Every payment was from your account. You are the client. You have every right to terminate those services. They don't have a leg to stand on if they try to come after you for anything." A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. But what about the things they're saying? Tiffany's texts. Our harassment, David finished for me. And Kevin's behavior, while not illegal, is reprehensible. He leaned forward. Now, you mentioned you gave Tiffany a credit card for small deposits. Do you have the statements for that card? I nodded, pulling a sheaf of papers from my bag. I printed them out this morning. He took them and began to scan the pages, his eyes moving quickly down the columns of numbers. For a minute he was silent. Then he stopped. He tapped a finger on one of the pages. "Carol," he said, his voice taking on a new, sharper edge. "What is this charge here?" "Maldives Overwater Villa and Yacht Package. It was charged 3 weeks ago. $428,450. I stared at him. "What? That can't be right. That's their honeymoon package." I told them I could contribute $5,000 towards it as a gift. They were supposed to pay for the rest. David slid the paper across the desk towards me. My eyes found the line item. There it was, in black and white. Billed directly to my American Express. My hands started to tremble again. They hadn't just accepted my gift. They had gone behind my back and charged the entire multi-thousand-dollar fantasy trip to my card, without a single word to me. "Oh my God," I whispered, feeling sick to my stomach. "It gets worse," David said, his voice grim. He pointed to another page. "What about these? Evergreen Financial Planning for Couples. $1,500. And this one, Golden Gate Realty New Homeowner Consultation. $500. I couldn't speak. My mind was reeling. Financial planning. A homeowner consultation. These weren't wedding expenses. This was them planning their entire future. A future built on a foundation of my money, extracted through lies and deceit. The promise to pay me back was a joke. They never intended to pay back a dime. Their plan, it seemed, was to drain me for as much as they could get. A wedding, a honeymoon, a down payment on a house, and then what? Cut me off? The cruelty and calculation of it were breathtaking. This wasn't just entitlement. This was a long con. And if you think that was the worst of it, you'd be wrong. David picked up another folder, one I hadn't seen before. "While you were talking," he said, "I took the liberty of looking into the joint savings account you still have with Kevin, the one you set up for his college fund." I nodded numbly. "He hasn't used that in years. There's only about $15,000 in there. An emergency fund." David opened the folder, revealing another bank statement. He slid it next to the credit card bill. "He withdrew $10,000 from it over the last 2 months, Carol. $5,000 right after you paid the venue deposit, and another $5,000 last week." I looked at the withdrawals, the dates mocking me. He had been secretly draining his emergency fund, my emergency fund for him, At the same time he was letting me pay for his entire life. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute. I felt nothing but a strange, hollow emptiness. The son I knew was gone. In his place was a thief. David looked at me. His eyes filled not with pity, but with a fierce protective resolve. "Carol," he said, his voice firm. "We are no longer on the defensive. It's time to attack." David Chun was a man of action. While I was still processing the full, sickening scope of their deception, he was already moving, orchestrating a counterattack with the cool efficiency of a battlefield general. "First things first," he said, picking up his phone. "We shut down the money pipeline. Immediately." He buzzed his paralegal. "Jessica, I need you to call the bank right now. I'm emailing you the account details for Ms. Meyer's joint savings with her son. I want it frozen. No withdrawals, no transfers, nothing. I want a complete freeze effective 5 minutes ago." He hung up and looked at me. "That's done. Kevin can't touch another penny of that money." A small weight lifted off my chest. It wasn't about the money anymore, but the act of cutting him off felt like taking back a piece of myself. "Next," David continued, turning to his computer. "The harassment." He began to type, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "We are drafting a cease and desist letter. It will be addressed to Tiffany, with a copy sent to her parents. It will state in no uncertain terms that any further contact with you, be it calls, text messages, emails, or social media posts, will be considered harassment and will be met with immediate legal action." He paused his typing. "It will also mention, in a beautifully worded legal paragraph, the unauthorized charges on your American Express. It will inform her that a full fraud investigation is being launched. Sometimes the threat of real consequences is enough to silence a bully." He printed the letter. It was a thing of beauty, terrifyingly official and brutally direct. He signed it, put it in an envelope, and buzzed his assistant again. "Maria, I need this sent via certified mail, return receipt requested this afternoon. I also want you to scan it and email a copy to Tiffany Whitaker and her parents. I have their addresses here." He turned back to me. "Now the credit card. We report it as fraud. All of it. The honeymoon, the financial planning, the real estate consultation. You did not authorize these charges. We will dispute them and we will win." He spent the next 10 minutes on the phone with the American Express fraud department, his voice a calm, authoritative drone as he laid out the case. He used words like fraudulent inducement, unauthorized user, and intent to deceive. By the time he hung up, a full investigation was underway, and the charges had been temporarily reversed, pending the outcome. I just sat there watching him work. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I wasn't the one doing all the emotional labor. I wasn't the one making the hard phone calls, navigating the conflict. I had an advocate. I had a weapon. And his name was David Chun. "So what happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. David leaned back, a faint, confident smile on his lips. "Now we wait. We've cut off their funds. We've put them on legal notice. The ball is in their court. They can either disappear quietly and lick their wounds, or they can do something stupid." He paused, looking at me thoughtfully. "Based on what you've told me about them, I'm betting on stupid." He was right. You'd think that a formal, terrifying letter from a lawyer threatening legal action for harassment and fraud would be enough to make them back down. You would think that having their secret slush fund frozen and their $28,000 honeymoon ripped away would scare them straight. But all it did was make them more desperate. And desperation made them infinitely more dangerous. As I drove home from David's office, feeling the first flicker of something that wasn't pain or anger, maybe it was hope, my phone buzzed with a notification. It wasn't a text or a call. It was a Facebook notification. A friend had tagged me in a post. My blood ran cold. With a sense of dread, I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking as I opened the app. And what I saw next proved that this fight was far from over. In fact, they had just escalated it to a whole new, very public level. The post was a video, and the thumbnail was a perfectly framed shot of Tiffany, her eyes red-rimmed and glistening with tears, her hair pulled back in one of those artfully messy buns. She was clutching a tissue, looking directly into the camera with an expression of heartbreaking victimhood. The caption above the video read, "I never thought I'd have to share this, but my heart is broken. Please pray for us. Against my better judgment, I hit play. The video started with a shaky, tearful sigh. Hi everyone, Tiffany sniffled, her voice cracking for dramatic effect. I didn't want to have to do this. Kevin and I believe that family matters should be private. But we've been left with no choice. She took a moment to dab her eyes with the tissue. As many of you know, our wedding was supposed to be this Saturday, the happiest day of our lives. But it's been canceled. Another sob. It was canceled by Kevin's mother, Carol. My name coming out of her mouth sounded like an accusation, a crime. We don't know why she did it, Tiffany lied, looking directly into the lens, a single perfect tear rolling down her cheek. We think she's always been a little bit jealous of our relationship. She's very controlling. And I think the idea of her son being happy with someone else was just too much for her. I felt a hot flash of rage crawl up my neck. The audacity, the sheer, unmitigated gall of this woman. She made some unreasonable demands, Tiffany continued, her voice gaining a bit of strength, as if she were feeding off her own lies. And when we tried to set some healthy boundaries, she retaliated. She used her money to punish us. She called every vendor and not only canceled, but she threatened them. She's trying to ruin our lives. All because she couldn't control us. The video ended with her breaking down into full-blown, heaving sobs, the screen going black. I scrolled down. The video had only been up for an hour, but it already had hundreds of shares and a torrent of comments. They were a knife to the heart. What a monster. How could a mother do that to her own son? Tiffany, stay strong. You don't need that kind of toxicity in your life. This is classic narcissistic parent behavior. Cut her off and don't look back. Praying for you and Kevin. She sounds like a nightmare. My friends, my neighbors, distant relatives, people I had known my whole life were liking the video, sending Tiffany little heart emojis, offering their support. They were believing her. Every single word. I was being tried and convicted in the court of public opinion, based on the crocodile tears of a master manipulator. I felt dizzy, like the world was tilting on its axis. She had twisted the narrative so completely, so skillfully, painting herself as the innocent victim and me as the cruel, unhinged villain. The part about me threatening vendors was a brilliant, evil touch. It made me sound unstable. For a moment, I felt that old familiar urge to fix it. I wanted to comment, to post my own side of the story, to upload the screenshots of the secret dress and the fraudulent charges. But then I heard David's voice in my head. Let them dig their own hole. Posting in anger would only make me look defensive and unhinged, proving Tiffany's point. So I did the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I closed the Facebook app. I took screenshots of the video and every single comment, saved them to a folder labeled evidence, and emailed them to David with a single line. This is what they did next. Then I turned my phone off. I couldn't bear to look at it anymore. I drove the rest of the way home in a state of shock. They hadn't just lied. They had launched a public smear campaign. They were trying to destroy my reputation, to isolate me from my own community. I walked into my silent condo and finally picked up the shattered picture frame from the floor. I carefully removed the photo of me and a smiling 6-year-old Kevin. As I looked at the happy little boy in the picture, a single cold thought cut through my pain and confusion. This isn't just a battle anymore. This is a war. And I was done playing defense. For the next 24 hours, I lived in a self-imposed exile. I kept my phone off, ignored the landline, and didn't even check my email. The silence was both a comfort and a torment. Every time a car drove by my condo, I flinched, thinking it was a well-meaning neighbor coming to lecture me, or worse, a reporter from a local gossip blog. Tiffany's video had made me a pariah in my own community. It was David who called me on the second day. Carol, he said, his voice calm but firm. I think you might want to turn your phone back on. And maybe take a look at Facebook. David, I can't, I said, my voice thick. I can't read any more of those comments. You won't be reading the same comments, he said, a hint of amusement in his tone. The tide, as they say, is turning. My heart pounded as I hesitantly powered my phone back on. It exploded with notifications. I braced myself and opened the Facebook app, navigating to Tiffany's tearful video. The top comments were no longer messages of support for her. They were something else entirely. It started with a single comment from a woman I didn't know. It read, This story seems off. My cousin was a waitress at the rehearsal dinner. She said the bride screamed at the groom's mother and threw her out for no reason. Said the mother was a class act and left without a word. Underneath that comment, a reply. Wait, my brother works for the catering company. He said the same thing. Said the mother was the one who paid for everything and the bride was acting like a total princess. It was like a small crack in a dam. And then the dam broke. Someone somehow, I suspect a disgruntled bridesmaid or a family member who knew the truth, leaked the screenshot of the upgrade wedding dress into the comments section. The photo with its damning caption was now there for all the world to see. The comments erupted. Whoa. So she was buying a secret, more expensive dress behind the mom's back. This changes everything. She's not a victim, she's a scammer. Then came the final devastating blow. A user, who identified herself as a travel agent in a local community group, posted something that went viral within hours. I can't stay silent on this, she wrote. This young woman, Tiffany Whitaker, came to me 3 weeks ago to book a honeymoon. She booked a $28,000 package to the Maldives and paid for it with an American Express card. The name on the card was Carol Meyer. I thought it was a generous gift, but now seeing this video, it looks a lot more like fraud. That was it. The narrative Tiffany had so carefully constructed crumbled into dust. The tide didn't just turn. It became a tsunami of righteous fury directed squarely at her and Kevin. So let me get this straight. One top comment read with over 1,000 likes. She used her future mother-in-law's credit card to secretly buy a luxury vacation, lied about it, publicly humiliated the woman paying for everything, and then posted a crying video to play the victim? The entitlement is absolutely breathtaking. This is the definition of biting the hand that feeds you, and then trying to chew the whole arm off. Kevin is just as bad. What kind of man lets his fiancée treat his own mother like that and then participates in the lies? Spineless. Even some of Kevin's old high school friends weighed in. Not surprised. Kevin always let his girlfriends walk all over him. But this is a new low. I sat on my couch scrolling, my jaw on the floor. I hadn't said a word. I hadn't posted a single rebuttal. I had done nothing. But the truth, as it so often does, had found a way to crawl out into the light on its own. Tiffany had tried to use the court of public opinion to destroy me, but she had forgotten the most important rule. You can't win your case when the jury has all the evidence of your crimes. My phone rang. It was my sister-in-law, Susan. Her voice was sheepish. Carol, I saw the posts. I had no idea. I am so sorry. I should have trusted you. Yes, I said calmly. You should have. I didn't offer forgiveness. I didn't say it was okay. I just let my words hang in the air. The air of me making everyone else feel comfortable at my own expense was over. As I hung up the phone, a notification popped up. Tiffany's video, the one with thousands of angry comments, had been deleted. Her entire Facebook profile was gone. It was a silent digital admission of guilt. They weren't fighting anymore. They were running. The days that followed were quiet. The storm of social media had passed, leaving behind a landscape of wreckage for Kevin and Tiffany. Their public shaming was the talk of the town. Friends who had rushed to their defense were now posting vague apologies or deleting their original supportive comments. The digital world has a long memory, and they were now branded as grifters. I heard through the grapevine that the fallout was immense. Several of Kevin's clients at his financial advising firm had apparently seen the posts and pulled their accounts, citing a lack of character. Tiffany, who worked in marketing, had deactivated her LinkedIn profile after her employer was flooded with negative comments. They had tried to ruin my reputation and in doing so had torched their own. I expected silence from them. I assumed they would crawl into a hole and wait for it all to blow over. So when an email from Kevin landed in my inbox late on Sunday night, I was surprised. The subject line alone was a masterpiece of delusional arrogance. Let's put this behind us. With a deep sense of foreboding, I clicked it open. The words on the screen were so utterly disconnected from reality that for a moment, I thought it had to be a joke. Mom, it began. I know the last week has been difficult. Emotions were high and people said and did things they didn't mean. Tiffany is very fragile right now, and the stress of all this has been incredibly hard on her. But we believe in family, and we believe in forgiveness. After a lot of prayer and discussion, Tiffany and I have decided to forgive you for canceling the wedding and causing this public scene. We are willing to let it go. We have been talking to Tiffany's parents, and they have agreed to help us with a smaller, more intimate ceremony in a few months. As a gesture of goodwill, and to show that we are ready to move forward as a family, we are willing to let you attend the wedding. We would appreciate it if you could behave yourself and not make things awkward. This is our day, and it's important that you don't make it about you. Let's move on and be a family again. Kevin. I stared at the screen, my jaw slack. I read it again, thinking I must have misunderstood. They had decided to forgive me? They were willing to let me attend? I had to behave myself? A sound bubbled up from my chest. It started as a small choked gasp, but it grew, swelling until it burst out of me in a wave of hysterical, uncontrollable laughter. I laughed until tears streamed down my face, until my sides ached and I couldn't breathe. I leaned back in my chair, shaking with bitter, liberating amusement. This wasn't an apology. It was a victory lap. A pathetic attempt to reclaim a narrative they had already lost. They had lied, cheated, and stolen from me. They had slandered my name all over the internet. And now, in their minds, they were the magnanimous ones, offering forgiveness to the person they had wronged. The level of narcissism was breathtaking. It was an illness. I wiped a tear from the corner of my eye, the laughter finally subsiding into a quiet, steady calm. For a moment, my fingers hovered over the keyboard. I composed a dozen different replies in my head, each one more scathing than the last. I could have torn him to shreds. I could have attached the credit card statements and the cease and desist letter. But then I looked at his name on the screen and I felt nothing. Just a vast empty space where a mother's love used to be. He wasn't worth the energy. He wasn't worth another second of my time. So I didn't reply. Instead, I moved my cursor up, clicked the mark as spam button, and then hit delete forever. It was the most satisfying click of my entire life. They could have their little fantasy of control. I was done playing their game. It was time to start my own. The Saturday that was supposed to be Kevin and Tiffany's wedding day arrived, bright and clear. I woke up not to the frantic energy of wedding preparations, but to the gentle sound of waves lapping against the shore. I wasn't in my condo. I was in a suite at a luxury spa resort in Carmel by the Sea, a 2-hour drive down the coast. The honeymoon fund I had started for them was, I figured, technically still my money. So I decided to use a small portion of it to give myself the gift I truly deserved: peace. My day was a study in tranquility. I had a deep tissue massage in the morning, the therapist kneading away knots of tension I didn't even know I was carrying. I spent the late morning by the adult-only infinity pool, reading a novel I'd been meaning to get to for months, sipping on an iced tea, the salty ocean breeze rustling the pages. I didn't think about Kevin or Tiffany once. It was as if a massive, noisy weight had been lifted from my soul, and I could finally hear my own thoughts again. At noon, I was stretched out on a chaise lounge, my hair still damp from the pool, a chilled glass of champagne in my hand. A waiter brought me a beautiful platter of fresh fruit and cheese. Life felt simple and good. My phone, which I had promised myself I wouldn't look at, pinged with a single notification. It was a memory from my calendar. Kevin and Tiffany's wedding, 2 p.m. I stared at the alert for a moment, a faint wry smile touching my lips. I tapped delete event. At exactly 2 p.m., I pictured the winery in Napa. I knew from Brenda that it had been rebooked almost instantly by another couple. I imagined that couple standing under the arbor where my son was supposed to stand, exchanging vows, surrounded by flowers and laughter that had nothing to do with my family's drama. The thought didn't bring me a jolt of satisfaction or a feeling of revenge. It just brought a profound sense of peace. Their story was over. Mine was just beginning. This wasn't about punishing them anymore. It was about healing me. For years, my life had revolved around Kevin's needs, his wants, his future. I had forgotten to have a life of my own. Sitting there with the sun warming my face and the sound of the Pacific in my ears, I felt like I was meeting myself again for the first time in a long time. And I liked the woman I was meeting. She was stronger than I ever gave her credit for. I picked up my phone, but not to check for messages or scroll through social media. I opened the camera. I took a simple photo. My own 2 feet, propped up on the edge of the lounge chair, with the sparkling blue ocean and the endless sky stretching out beyond them. In the corner of the frame, my champagne flute glinted in the sunlight. It was a picture of pure, unadulterated serenity. I uploaded it to my Facebook page, the first thing I had posted in weeks. I didn't tag a location. I didn't mention anyone by name. I just added a short, simple caption. 5 little words. Best decision I ever made. I posted it, then put my phone face down on the table beside me. I didn't need to see the likes or the comments. I didn't care who saw it. It wasn't for them. It was for me. It was a declaration of independence. A quiet, elegant, and final checkmate. I took another sip of my champagne and closed my eyes, letting the California sun wash over me. I was finally free. The Carmel trip was a turning point. It wasn't just a vacation. It was a reclaiming of my life. When I returned to my condo, it felt different. It felt like my own space again. Not just a home base from which I managed my son's life. I swept up the last of the broken glass from the fallen picture frame, and with it, I felt like I was sweeping away the last remnants of my old life. In the weeks that followed, the final pieces of the saga fell into place. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that the pressure had been too much for Kevin and Tiffany. Faced with social ostracism and the looming reality of their own financial irresponsibility without my backing, their perfect love had crumbled. They broke up. There would be no smaller, more intimate wedding. There would be nothing. Their shared future, built on my money and their lies, had evaporated. My lawyer, David, informed me that the credit card company had ruled in my favor, and all the fraudulent charges were permanently removed. The money in the frozen joint account was legally transferred back to my sole ownership. The cease and desist letter had worked its magic. I never heard another word from Tiffany or her family. One evening, about a month after my trip, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My heart gave a familiar lurch, but I forced myself to look. "Mom," it read. "I know I messed up. I'm so sorry. Can we please talk?" It was Kevin. For a long moment, I stared at the words on the screen. The old Carol, the fixer, the peacekeeper, would have jumped at the chance. She would have replied instantly, her heart aching with the hope of reconciliation. But I wasn't the old Carol anymore. I thought about his silence at the winery. I thought about his cruel words in my foyer. I thought about the lies and the theft. An apology via text message couldn't erase that. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together again. And more importantly, I realized I didn't want to put it back together. The chaos, the drama, the constant feeling of being taken for granted. I didn't want it back in my life. I held my thumb over the screen, took a deep breath, and hit delete. I didn't block his number. I just deleted the message. It was a quiet act, but it was decisive. He could try again, maybe someday. But the work of rebuilding that bridge would have to be his, and it would be a long and arduous job. For now, my side of the bridge was closed for renovations. For years, I believed that love meant endless sacrifice and that being a good mother meant putting my child's happiness above my own, no matter the cost. I learned the hard way that true love, especially the love you must have for yourself, has to have boundaries. Peace that is bought by sacrificing your own dignity isn't peace at all. It's just a form of silence. And I, for one, was done being silent. I had finally found my own voice, and it was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I felt it was important. My question for you is this. Have you ever reached a point where you knew you had to choose your own peace over a toxic family situation? If you've ever had to stand up for yourself against people who took you for granted, please share your experience in the comments below. Your story could be the spark of courage someone else needs to see today. Let's remind each other that we are strong, and we are not alone. And if my story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more. Thank you.